All right, let's dive into the incredible story of international trade. And trust me, this is not just about ships and cargo containers. It's actually a fascinating detective story. It's about how some of the biggest ideas in economics were born, how they were challenged, and in some cases, how they were proven completely wrong. So let's get into it.
It all really starts with a super simple question. Just look around you right now. The phone or computer you're watching this on, the coffee in your mug, the clothes you're wearing. Chances are they all came from this hugely complex global web. But why? Why isn't everything just made down the street? Well, that's the big puzzle we're going to piece together today.
So, first things first. Before we get to the brilliant minds and the shocking plot twists, we have to get our heads around the most fundamental reason any country bothers to trade in the first place. Let's start at square one. The core idea is actually really simple. No single country can do it all. It's impossible. Some places have oil, others have the right climate for coffee. Some have certain skills, others are just way more efficient. At the end of the day, every nation needs stuff it can't make itself or, and this is key, stuff that other countries can make much, much cheaper. It really just boils down to swapping what you have for what you need.
And when countries do this, the payoff is absolutely huge. We're talking more jobs, a ton of income, making better use of our planet's resources, and for us as consumers, way more choices. Think about it. At its heart, international trade is one of the most powerful engines for economic growth the world has ever seen.
Okay, so now we know why we trade. The next logical question is there a pattern to it all? Who should trade what and with whom? This is where our story really kicks off, and where we meet the first thinkers who try to crack the code.
And our first character is the legend himself, Adam Smith. Way back in 1776, he came up with a really logical, common-sense starting point. He called it absolute advantage. The idea is super simple. If you are absolutely the cheapest and best at making something, well, you should make it and trade it. So if Portugal makes wine cheaper than England, and England makes cloth cheaper than Portugal, it's a no-brainer. They should trade. Makes perfect sense, right?
Well, hold on a minute. What happens if one country is just more efficient at making, well, everything? Let's say England is better and cheaper at making both the wine and the cloth. According to Adam Smith's rule, does Portugal just pack up and go home? Do they just sit out of global trade entirely? This was the big gaping hole in his theory.
And this is where our second genius, David Ricardo, steps into the picture. He came up with a totally game-changing idea called comparative advantage. He argued it's not about being the absolute best, it's about what you give up to produce something, your opportunity cost. Basically, even if a country is less efficient at making everything, it should just specialize in whatever it sucks at the least. That way, everyone still wins from trade.
Now, Ricardo's idea was brilliant. It was a huge leap forward, proving that these relative costs are what really matter, but it left a massive question just hanging in the air. Why are the costs different to begin with? What is it that makes one country better at making t-shirts and another better at making cars? The story, it turns out, needed a much deeper explanation.
So the hunt was on for that deeper explanation. And in the early 20th century, a duo of economists, Heckscher and Olin, developed what pretty much everyone at the time believed was the final answer, the grand unified theory of trade.
Now, I know that sentence looks a little dense, but the rule they came up with is actually incredibly elegant and powerful. They basically argued that you can predict what a country exports just by looking at what it has a lot of. It all comes down to what resources are abundant and cheap in that country. This became known as the factor endowment theory.
So what are these factors they're talking about? Well, the theory boils everything down to two main things. On one side, you've got capital. Think of this as your machines, your factories, your technology, your money. And on the other side, you've got labor. That's your people, your workforce. The big idea here is that every country has a different mix of these two things.
And that leads to a beautifully simple rule. If your country is packed with people and labor is cheap, you should export things that need a lot of workers to make, like clothing or shoes. If your country is rich in capital with tons of advanced factories, then you should export things that need a lot of machinery, like airplanes or high-tech electronics. It's elegant, it's intuitive, it just feels right.
And for a long, long time, everyone just assumed this was it. This was the final word on trade. This beautiful, simple theory seemed to explain everything perfectly. But here's the thing about theories. They have to survive contact with the messy real world. And a huge plot twist was just around the corner.
I mean, for about 30 years, the Heckscher-Olin theory was basically gospel. It was taught in every university, written in every textbook, and accepted as a fundamental law of economics. People just assumed it was true because it was so logical.
That is, until an economist named Wassily Leontief came along, and he decided to do something that, surprisingly, no one had really done before. He was going to actually test the theory with cold, hard data. He was, in a manner of speaking, going to check the receipts of global trade.
And the setup for his big test was just perfect. He looked at the United States in 1953. After World War II, the U.S. was, without a shadow of a doubt, the most capital-rich, machine-heavy country on the entire planet. So according to the Heckscher-Ohlin theory, the U.S. should have been exporting capital-intensive goods and importing labor-intensive ones. Simple, right?
What he found was an absolute bombshell that just rocked the entire world of economics. Leontief discovered the exact opposite of what the theory predicted. The capital-rich USA was actually exporting goods that required more labor and importing goods that required more capital. It was completely backwards. This finding became legendary as the Leontief paradox, and it proved that our neat and tidy story of trade was far, far from over.
So how on earth could this be possible? Well, one of the key explanations is a really fascinating idea called factor-intensive reversal. Just look at this example of agriculture. In a country like India, farming is extremely labor-intensive, right? It involves lots and lots of people. But in the US, that exact same industry, agriculture, is super capital-intensive, relying on massive, expensive machinery. So the theory breaks down because a single product, like food, isn't just one thing. Its recipe can completely flip depending on where it's made.
Okay, wow, that was a whirlwind tour through nearly 200 years of economic thought. We've seen these giant ideas rise, get challenged, and fall. So let's put it all together in one simple, final cheat sheet to make sense of it all.
So here it is, the entire story in one place. We started with Adam Smith and his simple rule of absolute advantage, export what you're cheapest at. But it had that big flaw. So along came David Ricardo, who evolved the idea with comparative advantage, that brilliant insight about opportunity cost. Then Heckscher and Ohlin tried to build the ultimate theory, factor endowments, tying trade to a country's capital or labor. And for a while it seemed perfect, until Wassily Leontief shattered it all with his real-world paradox. You can see it's a perfect example of how science really works. Each idea builds on the last and gets a little closer to the truth by finding the flaws.
And all of that brings us right here, to today. The history of trade theory shows us that our understanding is never really finished. It's always evolving. So now, in a world where capital is just a line of code, where labor can be done remotely from anywhere on Earth, and where AI is completely changing how things are made, what do you think? What's the next great trade paradox just waiting to be discovered? What's the next big assumption we all take for granted that's about to be proven wrong? Thanks for joining me.